My name is Donovan, and I am a member of Sask Mycology as well as Saskatchewan Mushroom Picking. I run that second group. And today we're going to be talking about the boletes of Saskatchewan. And I just want to take a little tangent here real quick. This photograph, this nice, beautiful photo here is the what do you call it? I guess the group picture for Saskatchewan mushroom picking, and we came to this photo by having a competition where people submitted photos, and then the whole group on Facebook there voted on them, and then this was the winning photo by Amy Kirk, who's given me permission to use this. Okay. So first I'm going to talk about the Facebook groups. So like I said, I'm a part of Sask Mycology, and that's who's putting this on. It's a group of people run by a group of people, including myself, and it's through the Native Plant Society of Saskatchewan. It's through an umbrella of theirs. And the whole purpose of the group was to kind of determine what occurs in Saskatchewan in terms of mushrooms, because it's not actually known, and I'll bring that up several times throughout the presentation. It's not entirely known what mushrooms occur here in Saskatchewan. As well, we put on things like forays and events like that, where you can join a foray and come out with us and a large group of people, and we'll go through an area and pick mushrooms. And then you'll have experts such as myself weighing in on what mushrooms you have. And it's a fun and safe event. We do about 4 or 5 of those per year. The second group is the one that I run. It's Saskatchewan Mushroom Picking. It's focused more on the hobby itself. It's a fairly large community, and we basically talk about mushrooms, but we also, it's also become a platform where people can post a picture or photos of a mushroom they've found, and then people like myself and other group experts will weigh in on it. There are some rules if you want to join this group, such as your death is on you, things like that. We're not there to tell you exactly what it is, but to give you a suggestion. And it's a way to start this hobby off safely, because there is some danger to this hobby. For those who attended the poisonous mushrooms webinar, you may remember that fairly well. So let's just get started here. Why Saskatchewan? Why are we talking about Saskatchewan boletes? There are hundreds of bolete mushrooms throughout the world, if not more. And focusing on your specific region will help you separate what's important from what is not. So sometimes that's a problem with books, is that if you're going by a 1,000-page volume and you found a bolete, you have to go through pretty much every bolete in the world to find what you're looking for. Whereas right now, we're talking about what is just in Saskatchewan. And as well, like I said, very little is known about the prairie provinces, so it would be nice to know more about it. So what is a bolete? So we get this kind of, it's not so much a debate, but a bit of a confusion when the word bolete comes up, and you'll see it now and again in the groups. What is a bolete? Is it taxonomic, or is there another reason for that word? So originally, mushrooms with the same attributes were kind of lumped together in what we call a genus, or an order, or a family. And over time, genetic exploration as well as further study has kind of split them apart. So the term bolete doesn't really mean much in terms of taxonomic status anymore. As well, guild mushrooms have begun to fall into these bolete groups. So it becomes difficult when time goes on and those traits become hazy or non-existent anymore. So we're going to talk about boletes in terms of the hobby. So what is a bolete? It is a mushroom that has a soft, porous surface beneath the cap. It does not have gills. And that's what we're going to look at boletes right now. Now, there are a few exceptions, and we're going to mention them briefly because, like I said, when this all began, boletes were considered to have, be a group together because of that soft porous surface beneath the cap. However, we now know that some gilled mushrooms are in that same group. A bolete otherwise takes the classical structure of a mushroom. So that would include a stipe and a cap and a porous, well, not the porous surface, but the stipe and the cap. And I'm going to go through a little bit of terminology too, so you know, for the beginners, a bit more about what I'm talking about. Boletes are I should say terrestrial. So they do not grow off of wood. They do not break down rotting matter in the earth. Sorry, they do sometimes, but they do not grow off of wood or other structures. They are on the ground, and boletes are mycorrhizal. I will go through what that word means in a bit here. So bolete terminology, that's a cap, pretty standard. So when I say cap, you know what I'm talking about. That's a stipe. I'm not going to say stem, I'm going to say stipe, because that's what we call it. It's not a stem, it's a stipe. Here we have the pores. This is what separates boletes from the agaric mushrooms, or the regular old mushrooms that you see with gills, is that it has this porous underside. This is a veil. So what a veil does is that it covers those pores while they are developing, and eventually it rips off and it leaves kind of a ring or a sheath. We'll talk about that in a second. If you want a good example of a veil, go take a look at the button mushrooms in the stores, because those button mushrooms, sometimes you'll see that kind of leathery covering over the fertile area there, either the pores or the gills. When that veil rips away, we have what's called an annulus. I'm circling it here. I hope you can see it. And that annulus, we also sometimes call it a ring, but the actual word here is annulus. Here we have a sheathing annulus, or a sheath, and we're going to see a lot of those when we get to the Suillus mushrooms. And that veil has ripped away, and it has actually left a structure that's covering half of the stipe. And at the top here, you see some of the stipe is broken away. It no longer has this sheath around it. Scabers. So a scaber is a type of scale that is on some of the bolete stipes we're going to talk about. And it's these upraised sort of black little knobs. And if you run your hand across them, they're not sharp or anything. They just break off, but it gives it sort of salt and pepper appearance. And that's called a scaber. Here's the term viscid. Some of the mushrooms we're going to talk about are viscid, particularly when young. And that means they have a coating of kind of this slime, this mucousy slime over top of it to protect it as it matures. Reticulate. So we're going to talk about a group of mushrooms that have what's called a reticulate pattern. And that is this sort of web-like pattern over top of the stipe, and that's a defining feature of the porcinis that we'll talk about at the end. Bruising. So what bruising is when you push your finger into the porous underside of that mushroom. Some mushrooms, it will leave a bruise, which you can see here, and depending upon the color of that bruise, that helps us determine what kind of mushroom we're looking at. Here you can see this mushroom has bruised kind of a bluish color. Staining. So one of the ways in which we determine a type of bolete from another is we bisect it. We cut it from top to bottom in half. And a lot of boletes will actually turn different colors after being exposed to the air after you do that. Here, this one you can see is turning blue. And then finally, the term mycorrhizal. So mycorrhizal, if you've seen any of JC's webinars that she did before this one, she goes over it a little bit more in depth. But basically, mycorrhizal mushrooms, and all the boletes we're talking about are mycorrhizal. What they do is they form a relationship with a type of tree, and then that organism, because the organism is not the mushroom, the organism is underground, wrapped around tree roots. It grows alongside the tree and produces mushrooms as fruit. And mycorrhizal mushrooms, most of them will only associate with one specific type of tree. So we're going to go through these mushrooms in a bit, and we're going to talk about what tree they're under, and that way, so I kind of invented this differentiation up. That way, you go from mushroom picking to mushroom hunting. Because mushroom picking, which is great, you kind of walk around and what you see is what you pick up, and you determine if you can eat it or not. Mushroom hunting is where you know where to look and know what you're looking for, at least in my books. That's not an actual term, but you get what I mean. So if you know, for instance, that a slippery jack only grows under jack pine, you're not going to go look for it under aspen, if that makes sense. Also, while I'm doing this, if anybody has questions, you can post the questions in the chat there, and then Sandy will interrupt me and ask the question. So feel free to do that. So why are boletes ideal for beginners? For me, boletes are like the entryway to picking edible mushrooms. And there's a couple reasons for that. First off, in Saskatchewan, no toxic boletes has as of yet been observed. And when I say that, I mean by myself and others who are in these mushroom groups. There has not been one posted. And I don't know of anybody who has seen a toxic bolete or observed one. Having said that, even if there was a toxic bolete, there are no known lethal boletes or boletes that will harm you in any serious manner that I know of. Boletes are very easy to identify. Like I said, it's on the ground. You reach underneath. It's got that porous surface instead of gills. There you go. You have a bolete. Gilled mushrooms, if you'll recall from the poisonous mushroom webinar I did, you may have noticed that all of those mushrooms, except for one, have gills. So what's an easy way to get past that? Don't pick gilled mushrooms. Boletes are perfect. They taste great. Some of them I would consider, like porcinis, to be among the best tasting mushrooms in the world. They occur in large quantities in Saskatchewan. Where I live, it's hard to walk 10 feet in the fall without kicking over some kind of slippery jack bolete. Other places, red caps are everywhere, right? They grow in large quantities where they grow. They occur in most environments. You'll find them in cities. You'll find them in areas that are not boreal forest. And I would speculate that about 95% of the species in this province occur in the boreal forest. But mushrooms that associate with aspen and poplar or birch will grow pretty much everywhere because, I mean, even farmlands have aspens on them, right? And then there are not many species of boletes in Saskatchewan. So why is that important? Because you don't have to go through dozens and dozens and dozens of bolete species like you would in British Columbia to find out what you have. Here you have maybe like 12 to 15 species that you to choose from. It makes it very easy to actually ID what you have. Some bolete myths to dispel. So touching some boletes is dangerous. This goes for all mushrooms. No mushroom will harm your skin. Tasting a toxic bolete will hurt you. So we have a test that we do when we're trying to figure out some of the more advanced mushroom types, like different rasulas and stuff like that, where we take a piece of the mushroom, we put it in our mouth, we kind of wait like 30 seconds, and then we spit it out. A mushroom needs to be ingested to harm you. You can take the most toxic mushroom in the world, put it in your mouth for a while, spit it out. Nothing will happen to you. You need to actually swallow it and ingest it. Poisonous boletes turn blue when damaged. So if you go on these large mushroom identification groups on Facebook that have 100,000 people and they cater to the whole world, in places where there are toxic boletes, some people will go by the rule, don't pick ones that turn blue, because there are some toxic boletes that turn blue. However, not Saskatchewan. In fact, some of the boletes we look at today that are actually pretty good to eat also turn blue. So that's not really something to worry about here. There are no toxic boletes. So there are plenty of toxic boletes around the world. We've already established that. And there are no toxic boletes in Saskatchewan. I would just emphasize again, none that have been observed. We're going to talk a little bit about uncooked mushrooms because we are going to talk about edible mushrooms. All these boletes are edible, so we're going to approach it from that lens. So most wild edible mushrooms are actually toxic, and that certainly applies to boletes. These boletes, I think all of them, except for maybe porcinis, if you eat them raw, you're going to feel pretty sick. Cooking breaks down these toxins. And as well, I would like to mention that the cell walls in mushrooms contain chitin. I don't know how to pronounce that. I don't remember. It's the same thing that insects use to form their shells and exoskeletons. It's not digestible. Cooking breaks the chitin down. And as well, what it does is it releases all those nutrients and micronutrients, all those vitamins and such that you hear about mushrooms having, it releases them. Otherwise, it's going to be locked away to you if you just eat a raw mushroom. However, and this is important for all mushrooms, if we're talking about all mushrooms, cooking does not break down all toxins in all mushrooms. The poisonous webinar I did goes through that. All of those mushroom cooking does not break those toxins down. High sensitivity mushrooms. So this is important for boletes. A mushroom sensitivity is basically what it is. It's an adverse gastrointestinal reaction to a specific species. So this is not like a toxin. It's more akin to lactose intolerance. And basically it's almost usually like gassy, diarrhea kind of thing. Each individual species has its own unique potential to cause this within yourself. So just because I ate a red cap and got sick doesn't mean I'm going to get sick by eating any other mushroom. And I'm just listing here 3 common boletes that have higher sensitivity potential than average would be aspen boletes, slippery jacks, and larch boletes. So best practices, always cook your mushrooms before eating. And always eat one new species at a time, right? Remember I said that there's that sensitivity potential. If you go and eat 10 different types of boletes in one meal and you start to feel gross, you're still at square one because you don't know which one of those boletes made you feel sick. And the first time you eat it, only eat a small amount, right? That's the difference between having a bit of gas and being on the can for a day. Take photos of a new mushroom to refer to afterwards so you can learn the defining traits of that mushroom. If a bolete made you feel ill and you don't know the difference between that and the 10 other boletes you picked, that makes it difficult again, right? Check for bugs. Anybody who picks red caps or boletes in general knows that bugs love boletes. You'll get a great big worm pie in your mouth if you don't. Bring bug spray. This is Saskatchewan, because if you're going to take those photos to refer back to later, it's hard to do when you're in a cloud of mosquitoes and black flies. And then bring a big basket, not a plastic bag. Plastic bags make your mushrooms rot, and a lot of these boletes are pretty big, so you're going to need a bigger basket. So the first type of boletes we're going to talk about are the scaber-stalked boletes. These are boletes in the Lacinum genus. And just some notes here. These boletes are very difficult to get to species sometimes, especially the first one we're going to talk about. They tend to be mycorrhizal with aspen, poplar, and birch in this province, as well as oak, but there's not a whole lot of oak here. So we're going to talk about the ones that are mycorrhizal with aspen, poplar, and birch. And that means if you're looking for these, look for aspen stands or areas with birch and poplar. These have a high sensitivity potential. So remember we mentioned, sorry, those sensitivities. There is a greater than average sensitivity potential with the red caps that we're going to talk about first. And again, these are defined by having those raised scaber scales on the stipe. If you remember, we looked at that stipe that had those little black and white knobs on it. That's this group right here. And they have small round pores. So the first mushroom we're going to talk about is probably the most commonly picked mushroom in this province. It is the aspen bolete. We're going to say that's Lycinum, CF, and Cygne. So that CF there, here in the name, we put that because, is it Lycinum and Cygne? Hard to tell because orange cap boletes all look the same. And for all we know, there's 5 or 6 different species. We just know that it's like Lycinum insigne. Okay, well, I'm going to check and see if there are questions. Now that I've given you... Are there also mycorrhizal boletes in the grasslands or not associated with trees? No, there are in the grassland. They're associated with aspen and poplar. So you'll see aspen in the grasslands. Okay. Perfect. Sandy, if you could just buzz me with that message when that happens, that'd be great. In fact, what we're seeing here, this aspen bolete, I've seen that in grassland areas. But no, there are no mycorrhizal ones in this province, or non-mycorrhizal ones. They're all mycorrhizal. So the aspen bolete, this is a very large mushroom. If people have picked these, they know they can weigh, or they can stretch up to 8 inches across. They can weigh quite a bit. The cap ranges in color from light orange to brick red. The cap starts off round like this here, like a little baby, and then lifts up with age. And then those pores are white turning brown, and they have small round pores. And this mushroom, if you push into the pores, you will see it bruises purple, gray, or blue. And that there is a sign that we might be dealing with multiple species, right? Because some of them will turn blue, some of them barely gray, some of them have this weird purplish appearance. And yeah, I'll point out too that this is the age I like to pick them, little babies like this, because they're still firm and a lot less likely they're going to be full of bugs. And then, yeah, you could see the development there here, and they get quite large. Like this is next to a tree trunk, so you can see how big this is. These are mycorrhizal with aspen, birch, and poplar, all 3 of them. So you can imagine how common they are in this province. The stipe here is club-shaped, and it's very solid. These are actually very heavy mushrooms when you pick one up. And it's got the scabers there. And this stains gray, purple, or blue again when bisected. And these are found summer through fall. And I'm just going to blast back to that first one. You can see that staining starting to occur here. It's almost like a grayish purple. Just to point that out. The next one we're going to talk about is the closely related bolete. This is the birch bolete, Lycinum scabrum. These are up to about 8 inches across again, though usually smaller. The cap is various shades of brown. However, when there's rain or sun or a combination of the two, it actually leaches some of the color out of the brown there. The cap flattens and the margin turns upwards with age. And then the pores start off white, turning brown with maturity, just like the other one. And then again, these have small round pores. If you were to zoom in on the pores, you would see that they're circular and they're actually quite small. And then this bruises gray or blue. These are mycorrhizal with birch trees, and they're often a bit more solitary, right? Like I always see orange or those red caps, those aspen boletes just in large quantities everywhere. This one's often more solitary, I find. The stipe ranges from that large club-shaped stipe that we saw with the aspen bolete to a thin and more slender stipe, which we're seeing here. And again, it has those scabers on it. and then when bisected, this one will actually turn bright blue at the base, usually. And then these are found summer through fall. And then the last of the rough stem boletes we'll talk about is Lycinum holopus. I think I said that right. I don't know. This is the ghost bolete. And I think you can tell why they would call it a ghost bolete. So they're not as common. I don't see too terribly many of these being posted in my group every year. And I've only found it maybe once or twice. The cap is about 3 inches across. So this is a smaller version of what we were seeing with the others. The cap is pale brown to off-white. So if you remember when I was talking about the birch bolete, I said that water can leach that color out. Sometimes it's hard to tell if what you're looking at is a bleached out birch bolete or the actual ghost bolete. Then again, that cap starts off round and flattens out with age, and the underside is white, turning brown with age. However, there's no bruising in this one. So there was bruising in the other ones. If you push into the porous surface here, it's going to change color. Not with this guy. These are mycorrhizal with birch. However, they're often found in boggy areas. The stipe tends to be more slender, and you can see that here. It doesn't have that massive club ending. And yeah, it still has the scabers, but they're not black. They're white. If you were to run your hand across this, though, it would still feel rough, and those scabrels would still peel off. And then sometimes these will stain blue near the base upon bisection, other times not. Again, who knows? Maybe that's because of environmental factors. Maybe that's because they're different mushrooms. It's really hard to tell when the science is still out. And then these are found summer through fall. The next group of boletes we're going to talk about are the pepper boletes. And these are the boletes found in the Chalciparis genus. So, as you could probably guess from the title, these have a peppery taste. Anybody who's put one in these mouth or in their mouth instantly knows that they're tasting a pepper bolete. I think they actually taste nice, but it is peppery. These are mycorrhizal with birch, aspen, and conifers, so they do have a wide range here in the province. And there are 2 species known for sure in Saskatchewan, or at least I believe. There's Chalciparis pipperatus and Chalciparis pipperoides. They're both just called the pepper bolete. They look the same. There's virtually no difference between them. However, it's theorized that a lot of these pepper boletes are actually cryptoid species. So they're just simply not yet known by science. They haven't yet been separated from Chalciparis pipperatus or the type species. And these have angular pores. So if you were to zoom in on them, you'll see that they're still round, but they are almost like little hexagons or octagons. So the pepper bolete, Chalciparis pipperatus. Again, I've got that CF in there because we're just going to talk about one species here because they all look the same. They all taste the same. So the cap is very small. It's up to about 1 inch across at most, usually smaller. And this picture is on some wood here. You can see the wood grain, so it should tell you how small this mushroom actually is. It has what's called a thick cap cuticle. So the cuticle is basically the top layer of the mushroom, and here it hangs over when it's young and basically creates almost like this sort of cup structure. And then it has those large angular pores that we were looking at there, and that porous surface ranges from tan to reddish brown, and it bruises brown. And take a look at that stipe. It looks very different from the other boletes. These are mycorrhizal with birch, aspen, and conifers, like mentioned before. And that stipe is thin and stalk-like. So that's unusual for boletes. Boletes tend to have thicker stipes or stems. Whereas this one, like I found it before, where it looks almost like a dandelion. These do not stain. At least this species, pipperatus, doesn't stain. However, Chalciparis pipperatoides does stain blue at the base. That's the only way you can tell the difference between the two. That's why I'm not doing a separate slide for both. Then these are found early summer through the fall, so all year round. We're going to talk about the smooth stem boletes. We only have one in this province, and these are boletes found in the Hemilucinum genus. And this is a relatively new genus created in 2008. It was separated away from the true boletes, and it tends to have smooth stipes or stipes with very faint scabers on them. So kind of the opposite of what you would expect from the rough stem boletes that we talked about first. These ones look the same, however, they're called smooth stem boletes. And those stems tend to be of uniform thickness throughout, and these are found around aspens and poplars. And they have small angular pores. So we're going to talk about the yellow bolete here. Hemilucinum subglabripes. I don't know if I said that right again. Who knows? But you can, again, see that uniform thickness throughout that stem. So very different from the rough stem boletes where you would see kind of a club shape. So a little bit about common names. Common names don't actually mean anything. I mean, you could walk around and call this a morel if you wanted. If everybody else said, okay, it's a morel, then there you go. So online, if you want to look this mushroom up through the common name, you'd use the name yellow bolete or Hemilucinum subglabripes will always bring you to the right one. However, on the group, people have posted these and they've referred to them as butter boletes. So when you look online at butter boletes, you get a completely different mushroom than this one up. So that's why I'm bringing this up. You can call it butter bolete, yellow bolete, doesn't matter. Just so long as you're looking at the right species. And these are up to about 5 inches across, so they're a good medium-sized mushroom. They have a round cap that flattens and becomes upwards lifted. You can see that happening here. It's almost pushing the porous surface outward so the wind can catch it. And that cap is various shades of brown up top here. I think we can see it better here. Various shades of brown. And the porous underside is yellow, hence the name yellow bolete. And then it becomes a little bit greenish with age. And that porous underside does not bruise. So these are mycorrhizal with aspen and poplar. Like I said, it's got this uniform thickness with the stipe. However, sometimes it'll create this sort of almost like hook at the bottom. You can see that clearly here. They may have minute yellow scabers, like I said, and they're yellow. However, they turn pink with age. And you can see that here. I wish the photo was bigger. I think I can zoom it a little bit. Yeah, you can see it pink with age. I think that might be a better, right? Turning pink. And then, yeah, if you were to bisect this, again, it might turn pink slowly on the inside. And I did see that with one of the ones that was posted last year on the group. They had a piece bisected from it and it was slowly turning pink. Then these are found midsummer through fall. Okay, so now we're going to talk about the biggest group of mushrooms or bolete mushrooms in Saskatchewan. So the rest of them had maybe like 2, maybe 3, or 1 even species held within it. This one's got a lot. So these are mycorrhizal with pine and larch. So if you're in an area like mine up in Meadow Lake where there's a lot of jack pine and a lot of larch, you're going to see a lot of slippery jack types of mushrooms. And these are often viscid when young. Remember, I mentioned those mushrooms that are slimy when they're young. You can see that here in this mushroom in front of us. This is the slippery jack, the true one. And you can see how shiny it is. It's because it's going from this sort of slimy state to a more tacky state, which can turn a lot of people off of these. Really, if you are picking young slippery jacks, you might want to bring some paper towels along just to wipe that top off. Because once it's gone, it's gone. These have angular pores. We're going to see some with very large pores, and these have a high sensitivity potential. So only eat a small amount of a Suillus species first because it can make you ill. So we're going to talk first about the boreal bolete. Swillus glandulosus. And I'd like you to take note too of how big those pores are. And remember, we were talking about a sheath before. You can see clearly this sheath happening here. So the cap is brown to reddish brown in color, right? As you can clearly see, they're up to about 4 inches across. So again, a nice medium-sized mushroom. They are very viscid when young. They have these large yellow pores that are angular. And when you push your finger into those pores, they should not bruise. And if you were to bisect this mushroom, it shouldn't stain. These are mycorrhizal with jack pine, so you will only find them under jack pine. And they have that partial veil. You can see it here. I'm circling with the little mouse thingy that is covering the pores when it's young. And then as it expands, that rips away and leaves us a nullus here, that ring, and it leaves a sheath around the base. And the stipe is cream to pale yellow above the sheath. So that's what the stipe actually looks like. And then the sheath itself turns brown eventually. You saw that in the first photo. Go back real quick. You can see how it's turned brown here. And then these appear early summer through fall. This is the first of the Swillus species that I saw last year in the group. Most of them will be later in the fall. The next one is kind of an enigma. It's a very beautiful mushroom here, the painted bolete. Angular pores? Yes, I can. If somebody wants me to explain angular pores, go here. I'm going to zoom in high. Angular pores. See how they're not round little circles? Instead, they have these sort of straight lines. They're kind of almost like a, what do you call it, hexagon? I don't know. You can see here as well. This is not like a round circle. Whereas with the aspen bolete and those Lacinum species, they were round, not with these. And you'll see a species here as well where it is extremely evident coming up. So the painted bolete, Swillus CF spraguea. And then I emphasize the Swillus CF part here. Okay, it's a very beautiful mushroom, hence the name. I also heard one person refer to it once on the group as a party mushroom. I don't know why, but I thought that was funny. So these are about 3 inches across. So we're getting into a bit of a smaller mushroom here. The cap is covered in this raised, fuzzy, pinkish red scaling. Like if you were to run your fingers on it, you'd be like, that's weird and fuzzy. Again, they have these large angular pores. And this will sometimes bruise red or brown if you push your finger into those pores. Again, what a beautiful mushroom, hey? So these are mycorrhizal with jack pine and maybe larch. Now here's where it gets really weird. If you look up the information for Swillus spraguea, which is the painted bolete, it's supposed to only be mycorrhizal with eastern white pine. Now there's another similar mushroom called the western painted bolete, which is Swillus lacae, and that is only mycorrhizal with Douglas fir. So what the heck do we have here? Is this a new species that just looks like the others? Is it maybe that the information isn't fully complete in Saskatchewan? It just happens to associate with jack pine? I don't know. And maybe it's larch. The only places I found it have had both, so who knows? If you know, let me know. But I have found mushrooms that are identical to this in the Swillus genus that probably aren't this. So again, it has a thick partial veil that creates a sheathing annulus, and you'll see veil fragments hanging from the caps. You see them there. And if we go back to this one, you can see it, again, there's that partial veil, and it's left chunks of it hanging down. And you can see that sheath as well. The stipe up above that sheath is cream colored again, and it's got these same sort of raised fuzzy scales below it. And then sometimes when you cut this in half, it stains pinkish or brown upon bisection. I've never cut one in half, so I don't know if that's the case in Saskatchewan, because again, Maybe not. Who knows? And then these are found midsummer through fall. And now we're going to get a little bit more strange for people that already have a bit of a basis in bolete terminology. We're looking at the hollow bolete. People will be saying and checking this with their books, and they'll be going, where's the hollow bolete? The hollow bolete was until recently called Suillus cavipes, because that's what the hollow bolete is in Europe. Now we know that this mushroom that looks identical through genetic inspection is not Suillus cavipes, and now it's Suillus ampliporus. So if you're looking for more information in your book, Suillus cavipes is probably where you're going to find it. And this is an absolutely stunning mushroom, I will say. And look at those pores. Look how huge they are. The cap is up to 4 inches across. The cap is brown and fuzzy, like you run your finger across it. It's not what you expect from a mushroom. And then it flattens out with age. It becomes very flat. You can see that here. And it has these massive yellow pores that are angular. And when you hold it in your hand for the first time, you're never gonna mistake it for anything else. You'll always know what that is when you pick it up. There is no bruising in the pores. And as you probably have guessed from the name, it's completely hollow inside. So these are mycorrhizal with larch where we are. They are found in boggy areas. There's a spot where I go to pick them. They have a partial veil that again leaves a brown sheathing annulus. And that stipe, if you look at it, it's cream to pale yellow above the sheath and then browning below the sheath. That's something that we've seen so far throughout all these Suillus mushrooms. And then if you cut it in half, it's not going to stain. And to be honest, there's nothing to stain because it's hollow. And then these occur late summer through fall. And it's such a beautiful mushroom. As well, where I go picking, squirrels tend to leave mushrooms to dry in trees, and they seem to really love this one. So if you go into the boggier area where I go picking, then you'll find these drying in the branches. We're going to talk about a really slimy one now. This is the larch bolete. Again, people are going to try to look this up, and they're going to be like, where is it? In their books. This was until recently called Suillus gravei, which again is a European species. I don't know if I said that right or not because it's got 2 L's in it. But here we now call this Suillus clintonianus. So the larch bolete is about 4 inches across. The cap color ranges from reddish brown to yellow. Oh, so where I pick it, it's a jack pine forest, but there's a bog in that forest. And I go to the area where the jack pine forest meets the bog. And in that boggy area, there's also larch. And there you can see these kind of starting to pop up. Just in that area, it's where it's like a peat bog almost. But yeah, that's where I find these. And yeah, once you see one, you'll never unsee it. They're also delicious, I will say that. They're very mild, and then you can dehydrate them, and because they're so mild, what you can do is you can put them to reconstitute them, you put them in a different liquid I find is really nice. So something like red wine, and then you cook it. Because it's so mild tasting, it will pick up other flavors very easily. So back to this larch bolete here. Viscid, especially when young. You can see this one's already aged and it's still shiny with slime. It's probably not even slimy anymore. If you were to put your finger on it, it's tacky and gross. These supposedly taste pretty good. I don't pick them because they're so gross. They have small yellow angular pores, quite a difference from what we've been seeing so far, where they have those large pores. This one has small pores. That's how you're going to tell it apart from the boreal bolete that we saw at the beginning. And then those pores will bruise reddish brown if you push your finger into them. Here we can see the yellow version of it, right? Because I said it ranges from yellow to reddish brown. There's a yellow one. Again, mycorrhizal with larch. often found in boggy areas or on the outskirts of boggy areas with jack pine. But it's the larch bolete, grows with larch. It has a thick partial veil. So that veil, if you were to see it, that's going across, is very thick, and it rips apart and leaves this very kind of thick membrane ring here, this annulus, and a sheath down below. And that sheath, as you can expect from these mushrooms, will turn brown with age. But up top here, it's going to be nice and yellow. There is no staining or very slight brown staining if you cut it in half. And then these are found late summer through fall. They actually are really cool to look at. Somebody raised their hand. Geo, you have a question? Let me take a look. I don't see a question. Okay. I'll just continue then. If you have a question, please post it, Geo. We're going to talk now about the short-stemmed slippery jack. And that's Suillus brevipes. Very, very common slippery jack type here. And the first one that actually has the word slippery jack in the name. All of these are considered slippery jacks, but most of them are called boletes in their actual species name or their common name. So, a slippery jack. So, Suillus brevipes. One thing you're going to notice about this mushroom, and it's actually what makes it easy to ID, is that it doesn't seem to have any defining features. It's basically like the most basic mushroom ever. It's 4 inches across. The top of the cap is brown. It's viscid, but only when wet, which you can expect, right? Kind of gets a little slimy when wet. And it has somebody keeps raising their hand. Look at the chat here. There's a question above this comment. Okay. I don't see it. I don't see any question that you have there. Because I answered the one about this striking yellow hollow Suillus. Anyways, if you can just post the question, that'd be great. Yeah, I don't see any other questions. Anyways, Suillus brevipes here. Like I said, very, very, it's like a basic mushroom. Except for the pores, right? It's got these small, angular yellow pores. Very pretty. They do not bruise, so you can't go by bruising to ID it. These are mycorrhizal with jack pine. Where I live, where there's jack pine, there's these everywhere. They have no veil, right? So you can't ID it by a veil. The stipe is uniform in thickness and cream to pale yellow. No staining if you cut it in half. So basically, this is like the most basic of boletes. It is quite good tasting. I like them. These are found summer through fall. And that's its defining feature, is no real defining features. The blue staining slippery jack. Now this one is the most common slippery jack where I live. This is Suillus tomentosus. And you can see the blue there if you zoom in a little bit. Right? It lives up to its name. It stains blue. So the cap, it's actually a fairly small mushroom. It's about 3 inches across. It's pale yellow. Sometimes you get these scales, if you can see here, that darken with age. It's very dry for a Suillus species. So most of the other ones that we've talked about, except that hollow bolete and the painted bolete, will be kind of slimy when young or get slimy when they're wet. This does not. And sometimes you can see it cracking a little bit because it's so dry. And then it has very small angular pores. And if you push your finger into it, it will turn blue. And it will be like, I'll show you in a sec, it's actually like a pen ink blue. It's very vibrant. You can see that blue right there, right? Somebody's broken a piece of it off and it's staining. These are mycorrhizal with jack pine. They have no veil, though this is completely different from most of the other Sowilla species that we've seen. The stipe there that you can see tends to be short and fairly uniform, those just slightly club shaped. You can see a slight club shape here. And it slowly stains blue if you cut it in half or if you damage it in any ways. In fact, if you pick this mushroom up, you pick it, it will sometimes start to stain blue without you damaging any part, simply because it's been picked. It starts to turn blue. It's really interesting to watch. And these are found midsummer through fall. And then the actual slippery jack. This is the type species for the whole slippery jack genus. This is Sowillus luteus. No, staining doesn't affect the taste. It does affect people's, in some cases, it will affect people's comfortable, like whether or not they're comfortable with picking it. And that's places where they have toxic boletes that stain blue. But really, this one is kind of very obvious what you're looking at. It's a blue staining Sowillus. At least for me. I guess I shouldn't say that, because it may not be for everybody. So this is the slippery jack. This is the most common Sowilla species throughout the world. I think it covers a good portion of the world. So up to 4 inches across. It's brown to reddish brown. So kind of what you saw with that Sowillus, the short stem Sowillus. Now the cap may be round or pointed, and that's a bit different. I'm going to take a look back at this. You see how the cap is starting to point upwards a bit? So that's something that you can see in this one, kind of a defining trait. Though it's not always there. Sometimes it'll be round like you're seeing right now. They are viscid when young. So again, they're slimy. That's kind of like a Sowillus thing. Then they have small, angular yellow pores. And they don't bruise. If you push your finger into it, it won't bruise. And these are mycorrhizal with jack pine. So that's a very big association for a lot of these Sowilla species is jack pine. And again, I will point out, there's that pointy top, right? You don't see that in the other Sowilla species so much. The stipe here is cream colored and spotted above the annulus. I don't think you can see there it's spotted. And it turns purplish brown below. And then you have this huge floppy annulus ring here. It's much different than the others. And sometimes it kind of like slimes out. That's what I'll call it. Here's an example of that. It's just turned to slime and turned purple. And the whole sheath is gone. You can see the spots here, actually. If you look, we'll zoom in a little bit. See those spots? And again, yeah, that ring turns purple. And it's found midsummer through fall. It is quite a beautiful mushroom to look at. I will say that. So now we're going to move on to the porcinis. And these are mushrooms in the Boletes genus. These are the most sought after of all boletes. They are targeted by professional mushroom pickers. So people who go in here and they pick chanterelles and morels, we've all heard of that, right? They also look for porcinis. These are hard to get to species in Saskatchewan. We're going to talk about that a bit when we go to the next slide. I think it's the best tasting mushroom of all time, or at least in the top 5. And the pores are very small and angular. There's a beautiful photo of them, right? They could be quite large, very meaty mushrooms. So again, I've got that CF. Boletes edulis may not even occur here. You know what, Slippery Jack? If you want a mushroom that doesn't have worms, go for the hollow bolete. You can't have a worm in something that's hollow, right? Well, you can, but it's probably just living there. I've seen slugs inside of them, but you're not gonna have the same issues that you have with some of the others. As for the blue staining Slippery Jack, I generally don't see too many bugs in that. The brevipees, I do like the short stem. The other ones I imagine would be pretty buggy because they're more meaty. Whereas the blue staining one, like it's kind of dry and it's almost like I don't know what the word is. Not spongy, but like pliable. When you squeeze it, it'll go back to its original position. It's like a spongy, yeah. Dry and spongy. I hope that answers it a bit. The pepper bolete has no bugs because it's too small. So further questions on that, just let me know. So again, this is also called the sep and the penny bun. Maybe you've heard of those common names before. They're up to about 10 inches across. So this is the biggest of the mushrooms we're going to talk about today. They can be absolutely huge. The cap is brown and it may take on this kind of wrinkly appearance. You'll see that. And even when it gets flat like this, it flattens out. It never really upturns. It's always just kind of there. It doesn't have that upturned look that aged boletes in the other genuses that we've talked about have. These, again, have angular pores that are off-white, and they turn light green with age. And there's no bruising if you push your finger into those pores. At least I don't think there would be. These are mycorrhizal with spruce, aspen, and poplar. I have found them around jack pine, but it might have simply just been because there was poplar in the area. But traditionally, they are mycorrhizal with spruce, aspen, and poplar in Saskatchewan. That stipe here is club-shaped, but like the King Kong of club-shaped, like it's very striking. And it has a reticulate web-like pattern down the stipe. We talked about that in the terminology. When you're looking for the type of bolete, this is what you want to check for, because if that web pattern is there, you're good to go. Does not stain upon being bisected, and found summer through fall. Now, when we say Boletes edulis, we call it a Boletes edulis group or Boletes edulis clade, because what we have in Saskatchewan is could be 5, could be 10 species that all look the same macroscopically. And no one is going to pick this mushroom just to spend hundreds of dollars to have a gene sequence. They're going to eat it. So do we have Boletes edulis in Saskatchewan? Probably not. There's just not enough work in the area as of yet to figure out what we actually have, but it's very closely related and has the same taste and shape and look to it. Now, for fun, remember when we talked about taxonomy and everything at the beginning, and I said at some point they realized genetically that there were actually mushrooms with gills that were actually in the Boletes genus and not genus, but like the Boletes order and stuff like that, the family. And everybody's like, wow, that's weird. I'm going to talk about one of those. This is the golden gilled bolete. It's basically the Phyloporus genus that we're talking about. So a bolete with gills. It's best for beginners to double check because, again, this is not the traditional bolete. So double check to make sure you have the right mushroom. Gills tend to be forked, and these are found under hardwoods, and they're actually very uncommon in Saskatchewan, which is hilarious to me because you get people, different types of people who want to pick mushrooms. I think the most common sense people, what they do is they learn 5 or 7 mushrooms that exist in their area. They learn how to ID it well. They pick it, and that's all they really care about. And then you get people like myself where it's like Pokemon and you need to collect them all. And every now and then I'll have people in the group saying, is this a gill bolete? Is this a gill bolete? Is this a gill bolete? Because it is such a striking idea once you get into it that there is actually a bolete with gills that you really are trying to find it. And it's hilarious that it does pop up, but only ever once or twice a year, it seems. So this is Phyloporus CF rhodoxanthus, because again, it's kind of hard to get the species. So very small mushroom. They're up to about 3 inches across. They're red to pale brown in color. We've already seen both of those. They have these yellow gills that are very striking, and they run down the stipe or the stem here, and they're often forked. We can't see that clearly here, but there's no bruising if you push your finger into this. And with gilled mushrooms, one of the things that helps us get down to the type of gilled mushroom you have, because there's way more gilled mushrooms than boletes, is we do spore prints. You don't really need to do that with boletes because you don't really need to determine that what you have is edible or not, if that's what you're out for. But with guild mushrooms, you really do have to take that step sometimes. So this has a yellow spore print. These are found under hardwoods. I'm going to suggest that it's likely either poplar or aspen in Saskatchewan. Other places, it tends to be found under oak and beech, I believe, more commonly than not. But it does have under other hardwoods listed in different various resources that I checked out. That stipe is slender. It's yellow at the apex here, and then it kind of turns red towards the base. However, there could be some variation in that color. And then that stipe may appear ribbed at the apex up here. So I'm going to show you what I mean. Here we go. And again, you see that color variation too. There's just a little bit of purple there. But you can see that ribbing appearance. And then these are found summer through fall. We do have other guild bolete types that I'm not going to really talk about too much. We have the brown roll rim mushrooms, which I brought up in the toxic mushrooms of Saskatchewan. It's a guild mushroom, so I'm not including it here. And it can really hurt you. We have pine spikes, which I do pick. That's this guy right here in the Crugonphus genus. And I'm not going to bring them up more than that as well because it's not for beginners. It has a cortina and rust red gills. Again, if you watch the poisonous webinar, you'll know why that's a problem. We have spike caps in the Gomphidius genus. They're very, very slimy. Don't bother. And then we have the false chanterelle, Hygrophilopsis aurantiacum. It looks like a chanterelle. It's a little bit more floppy. It's not toxic that I know of, but it's extremely disappointing to think you have a chanterelle and that you have a false chanterelle. We'll talk a little bit about this too. When people are picking boletes, often they'll come across this and they'll think, well, this is the weirdest bolete I've ever found. What this is a fungus called Hypomyces chrysospermus that has coated the bolete mushroom with itself, in part to feed and in part to use the structure of that mushroom to propagate its own spores, right? Because that's why mushrooms are shaped how they are. It helps to propagate those spores. And it looks like this webby disappointment here. Other boletes observed upon rare occasion. These have been posted to the group once or twice, or I've seen photos of them. The lurid bolete, Suillus luridus. That's this guy here. Big, big mushroom. Looks pretty intimidating. It's actually edible too. You just got to cook it. Veiled bolete. And that's Paragyrodon Spirosporus. Somebody sent me a picture of that once. However, it was in a city, so I believe it might have been invasive with oak. And then we have what I call the random unidentified Suillus species. So we do have a whole bunch of Suillus species that have pretty much no defining characteristics about them. And you look at it and you're like, well, that's not Suillus brevipes. I have no idea what it is. It's just some random Suillus is what I call it. And sometimes you'll see that too when people comment as to what mushroom they're posting photos of. They'll just say Suillus because really, without a whole lot of information like bisecting it, bruising it, stuff, it's really hard to get down to the actual species that you have. Other considerations. The Qu'Appelle Valley and oak. So the Qu'Appelle Valley is a unique little area in Saskatchewan where oak exists. Spur oak is native there. That is not the case anywhere else, just along that little part in the Manitoba area. There's an awful lot of boletes that are only mycorrhizal with oak. So this presentation does not apply to this area. I have no idea what grows there. So yeah. As far as I'm concerned, we'll just consider that Manitoba right now. And right here, again, I'm just circling this. This is called the Satan bolete. This is a toxic bolete, grows under oak, I believe. So again, do toxic boletes occur in Saskatchewan? Maybe here, I don't know. Haven't really gone picking anything there. Other things to consider, some boletes have a tendency to absorb heavy metals as well as exhaust fumes and pesticides. So don't go picking boletes outside of a factory, right? Or near the ditch of a busy highway, because that can really build up in your body and it can do some damage to you. As well, like I say, this is based upon what has been observed in the two groups, the two Facebook groups, as well as photos that have been sent to me. Sorry. As well, there is a book on the mushrooms of Saskatchewan. It's called Mushrooms of the Boreal Forest. I've also gone through that. But there could very well be other unknown species that occur here. And again, like I mentioned, the veiled bolete in Saskatoon, I believe it was in a park under some oaks. That's an invasive species, more than likely, that came in with that oak when that park was being planted. And you can see that in yards too. So let's talk a little bit about something a little more fun here, cooking notes. So all of the boletes mentioned dehydrate well for storage. You cut them very thin, you dehydrate them in a dehydrator or in like, you can use an oven if you're putting it on a screen at the very lowest temperature with the door cracked open, or you can just put it in front of a fan. Dehydrate them until cracker dry, put them in a jar, and they will last for years. I have some from 3 years ago that I'm still eating, some aspen boletes. When reconstituting boletes, like I said, you can use other liquids such as wine or chicken broth, or just add them to the soup dry so they absorb the broth. Dried boletes can be powdered to make an excellent soup base. If you've got too many like red caps or something. Boletes can also be fried in butter or however you want to fry them, but butter is traditional, and then frozen for later use. In a jar, yes, store them in a jar. There's a lot of resources that say that. I've tried other things. The jar is the best. Stick it in the freezer, and they'll last forever. Cooking notes. Some people find the caps of scaber stalked mushrooms, such as the aspen bolete and the birch bolete, they find them to be too mushy, like kind of like almost like spongy, but wet spongy. So dehydrating them first will get rid of this. And not only will it get rid of it, but it will make the taste actually better. A lot of these boletes will actually have a more noticeable taste. Their taste becomes compounded after dehydrating them first, and then reconstituting them by putting them in water. But if it's still no go for you, just use the stipes instead of those like big club shaped stipes for those aspen boletes. They're very firm. You can slice them up thin, and they're very nice to eat as well. The high sensitivity potential of slippery jack species can be reduced by peeling away the top cuticle. So that's like a layer. I'll show you a photo of that in a minute. And then pepper boletes, those little tiny ones that are peppery, can be dehydrated, powdered, and then used sparingly as a spice, like a spicy little additive on top of something. Peeling a cuticle. A cuticle is this top layer in most Suillus species, so most slippery jack species, it'll peel away like tissue paper. You can see somebody's just peeling it away. And also that's a way to get like some of these like stickier, slimier species that are kind of stickier when they're adults. You can get rid of that too by just peeling the top part away. Just put your finger under, yank, the whole thing comes off. Some more cooking notes. Boletes can be used in all types of dishes and in all types of ways. Their delicate, soft texture, in my opinion, makes them ideal for soups and risottos and sauces. Porcinis are highly valued, and you can buy dried porcinis off of Amazon and at Superstore. I've seen them too. And then most of the mushrooms in this presentation have specific recipes listed on foragerchef.com. So if you want a recipe specifically for the aspen bolete, foragerchef.com, right? Specifically for the hollow stem or the smooth stem bolete, foragerchef.com. Yum, yum. I saw this. I couldn't help myself. It looks like a portobello stuffed with porcini and then baked. I think that's something I'll try. It looks really good. And that's it. So again, the Facebook groups here, Saskatchewan Mushroom Picking. The one I run, it's dedicated to the hobby of mushroom picking and mushrooms in general. If you're not a member, be a member. Oh, I have no clue, Sandy. I don't think this kind of winter has happened in my lifetime. So she asked, how do you think mushrooms will be this year? It'll either be amazing or a disaster. I don't know. I really don't know. I think it also depends on the next month or two. Um, if anybody else wants to shoot a guess or has some resource behind what this would look like, but again, I've never seen a winter where there is no winter or snow, or February has been +2. So hopefully it's good. Hopefully. Anyways, I'd also like to mention that I'm going to be doing another one of these webinars probably in about a month's time. I'm not entirely sure what I'll be talking about, but probably some of the non-gilled mushrooms that are good for picking, like the toothed mushrooms, something like that, or maybe the ridged mushrooms like the chanterelles and stuff like that. But this is a good time for questions. So